Good evening. I'd like to call this January 30th, 2023 regular session of the Carmel Clay School Board to order. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Everyone is here and accounted for.
Wonderful. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we will now move on to the presentation portion of our meeting tonight with the 2023 Bandmaster of the Year, Mr. Todd Crosby.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Beresford, ESC personnel, and our school board for allowing me to be here tonight to recognize Mrs. Greta Pote, our Clay Middle School Band Director. Recently, Greta was nominated for the 2023 Bandmaster of the Year. So if we could give Greta a quick round of applause. Phi Beta Mu is an international bandmasters fraternity. Membership consists of a 3-year vetting process. This award is only given to members of this prestigious fraternity. Membership consists of, this award is only given to members of this prestigious fraternity. The best analogy that I could probably give to this, it's like being an MVP in an all-star game. So once again, I've worked with Greta for 11 years. Her work ethic, her level of commitment and dedication to our students is just, this award couldn't go to a better person. So once again, I just want to congratulate Greta Pote on the 2023 Bandmaster of the Year.
We will now move on to the public comment section of our meeting. So individuals that were wishing to speak were placed into 2 groups. Group 1 will consist of Carmel Clay School students, parents, guardians, Carmel Clay School's employees, and Carmel residents. And Group 2 will consist of any persons in not Group 1. You must be recognized by the presiding officer, which is myself, and must preface your comments with your name and group affiliation if applicable. You may not reference specific corporation employees, patrons, or students. Please direct your comments to the board and not one individual person or board member. And as a general matter, we do not act or respond to questions or comments made, but will take them under advisement. If your comment is too lengthy, personal attack, or not abiding by any of the public comment guidance, I will interrupt you. So tonight we have a group of 7 in the first group and 1 in the second, so we should have time for everybody. We will go ahead and do the bingo balls that will do the order, so when I get the number, I will call your name, and then please come up. Up at the board, you'll see the timer for the 30 minutes that we have allotted. Each individual person has 3 minutes in order to speak, and it's signified by the green button when you can start, yellow to give you a 30-second warning, and then the red is when your time is up.
First up, we have number 1, followed by number 3.
Okay, so Rachel Gallo, you're up first, followed by Diana Furchmine. Sorry if I butchered that. Yeah, okay, so you'll be on deck. All right, you can go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Gallo. I'm a Carmel resident. I'm a wife and mother of 5 kids, ages 9, 7, 5, 3, and 1. I'm here tonight to respond to Carmel School Board's plan to spend $3 million to demolish most of Orchard Park Elementary School. Please consider negotiating with Valor Classical Academy to sell the building to them. This would be a win-win situation, as there could still be space for your planned Educare building and storage. Using tax dollars to renovate a public school building for the explicit use of Educare only serves the Carmel school employees. As a Carmel resident and taxpayer, it's extremely disappointing that you have not negotiated with Valor, so a responsible fiscal decision can be made that meets everyone's needs. It's in the best interest of the community and children for an alternative school to be in Carmel. Thanks.
Thank you. Diana,
On deck, we have number 7.
which is Christina Lopez. Christian Lopez.
Hi, my name is Dina Furchman. I am a parent of a child at Carmel High School. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you today. It is my understanding that the Carmel Clay administration is planning on spending $3 million to demolish Orchard Park in order to build a private daycare and a storage space, rather than to sell the building to a charter school, which would give parents a choice in the education of their children. So basically, it will cost us $3 million to make sure that we don't have a choice of where we send our kids for their public education. Allowing parents to choose the source of their children's public school education provides us with school diversity and choice, which we all want diversity and choice, right? When this item actually finally becomes part of the agenda for the next school board meeting, I would like to humbly request that you would consider selling the Orchard Park to a charter school. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Lopez,
And then on deck, we have number 5.
which is Jim May.
Good evening. My name is Christian Lopez. Everyone calls me Poppy. I'm new here to Carmel, only 3 years. I just signed up because they said, do you want to say something? I said, sure. So I'm from New York City. I saw the progression of Success Academy and all the charter schools there. Back then, it was always because disciplining needed to be done in Black and brown communities, and that was their mantra, that was their thing. Now it's religion. At the end of the day, I'm a big supporter of public schools. My kids, I'm raising 2 daughters here, started a business here. I'm very vested in the community with kids, with coaching, with teaching, with being part of the infrastructure here. That said, I want to keep public dollars public dollars. I think that schools should be, if we're going to make a public school, let's make it a public school. And let's use it in that way. But anyway, I just wanted to introduce myself and enjoying the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. May,
And on deck, we have number 6.
Becky Lime.
Hi, I'm Jim May. I'm a parent of 2 kids at Woodbrook Elementary. I just wanted to speak out in favor of the plans at Orchard Park, especially as they pertain to expanding the Educare program. Our teachers and staff deserve enormous credit for the high-quality education our kids get. I think by providing affordable, high-quality, convenient childcare to them will continue to attract the cream of the crop. I also want to extend my thanks to the schools for defending against the lawsuit from Valor. I think there's been some confusion there about what a negotiation was. My understanding is from the public court records, the opening salvo in the negotiation was prove that you followed the law or we're going to sue you in court for $1, which isn't really the story that's being told tonight. Additionally, as far as it goes on Hillsdale schools, I think that would have a negative impact on the community as a whole. If we look at Hillsdale schools in Indiana, there's only one right now. It's not a terrible school, but it's in the top 22%. That's far below what we expect from our schools here in Carmel. Of our 14 schools, 13 are in the top 15%, 8 are in the top 5%, and 2 are in the top 1% in terms of reading and math proficiency. I think there's some debate to be had on whether or not charter schools can play a role in communities where the academics are suffering, where the schools are suffering. That's not the case in Carmel. That's not really the debate we're having here. And I think we need to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lime.
President Browning, number 4 is on deck.
All right, Lauren Ely. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Becky Lime. I'm a longtime Carmel resident. I live in Orchard Park, and I want to tell you that I support the plans for the Educare and the demolition and the green space. I was on the steering committee, or the short-lived kind of steering committee before COVID, for the determination of what the plans would be for the use of the school. When I found out that I went to the Valor presentation, went home, did some math on the cars that would be coming through the neighborhood because there isn't any bus service. It was shocking. And the location of the school is unique in that it's really the only school, especially elementary school, that is surrounded by a neighborhood. 700 or 800 cars a day, and I'm figuring in and out because they're passing houses, it just isn't necessary. So I support the plans for EduCare.
Thank you for your comments. Lauren Ely.
And President Browning, the final is number 2 on deck.
Holly Wilson.
Hi, my name is Lauren Ely. I'm a parent of 2 school students. One is at CCS and one is at a private school. The Orchard Park building has now sat empty for about 2 years. I attended the Valor School Board information meeting, and they indicated that they know the building is in need of mold remediation as well as some roof repairs, and they are eager to start repairs so the building can be used as an educational building. Our tax dollars continue to go toward upkeep on the vacant building that is currently both an expensive storage facility as well as a liability. Carmel Schools has indicated they are able to renovate half the building for a daycare at an estimated cost of $3 million. I would question why at least half of the building is considered safe for a daycare but not safe for an elementary school. At the informational meeting I mentioned earlier, Valor representatives indicated they had already researched quotes for renovating the existing building to be habitable. I'm operating under the assumption that remediating the entire building is a valid alternative to a demolition and rebuild. My older child recently started attending a school with a classical curriculum, and she is thriving. She is part of a growing trend toward alternative education, whether that be homeschool, hybrid, or private school. The past 3 years have shown us that education is not one size fits all, and that it's good to have choices. Unfortunately, choices can be limited for many due to cost or commute distance. It seems to be common sense to grant Valor the use of the building so the safety issues can be remediated and provide a much-needed educational opportunity to all children of Carmel and Hamilton County. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson.
Thanks for allowing me a few minutes tonight. My name is Holly Wilson. As the chair of the founding board for Valor Classical Academy, I'm here to speak on Valor's behalf, but most importantly, to speak on the family's behalf of the 448 students who are knocking on the Orchard Park doors waiting to be let in. Orchard Park was a public school building, but now it's just another building owned by the public school. It was bought and paid for by tax dollars for the public education of students, but now it's no longer being used for its explicit purpose. As a matter of fact, it's no longer wanted or needed for any public school purpose. And if that wasn't clear before, this new recommendation to demolish nearly the entire building and to renovate the remains for a private organization makes this a fact that can no longer be masked. Carmel's school board has a grand opportunity to once again establish themselves as a leader by hosting Hamilton County's first charter school of Valor's kind, and that's right, second only in the state. And I would urge you to check those facts that someone presented tonight. Let's see. Families all over the nation come to Carmel, and I'm sure you know that, for educational school choices, excellent school choices. Carmel's does a wonderful job with that. We're not here to argue that. Your school board holds the key to making a valuable decision for Carmel by literally unlocking its doors to Valor. As you strive to represent your constituents and stakeholders and as you provide the best education that you possibly can to each student in every district, how can you forget about providing for your Carmel students who need a school with a special focus provided by Valor that's not available in Carmel schools? Opening Orchard Park to Valor will also alleviate the $3 million tax burden that has been recommended to your board to repurpose the property and will save your corporation the expense of maintaining the building. It could even generate an income from a sale or lease of the entire building. Before the judge's ruling, your corporation denied our request to negotiate a fair market value to purchase the Orchard Park building outside of the dollar law. We haven't moved from that position, and we're asking for your reconsideration. If you're not sure of that, you can ask your counsel. Thank you for your good work representing the people who trust you to provide an excellent education in this community. These are your people who are here, who are asking for Valor to open in Orchard Park. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We will now move on to consent. Do I have a motion to approve consent items? Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving consent, including personnel, claims, payroll, approval of gift in the minutes of the December 12th, 2022, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Jennifer? Okay. All in favor. Thank you. We'll now move on to action items. Action item number 1 is the recommendation to approve the attached list of operational fund accounts to be carried forward to 2023. Mr. McMichael.
Thank you. Part of our process is that accounts in the operations fund essentially die at the end of the year unless we proceed with this process to carry them forward. The accounts listed are such things as technology funds that we have continued need for these funds in addition to the new budget essentially. So that's what this process is about.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? All right. All those in favor of approving the accounts, ongoing projects to continue into calendar year. Sorry, let me start over. It is recommended the Board of School Trustees approve the attached list of operational fund accounts to be carried forward to 2023. It's also recommended to any account with an unencumbered balance of December 31st, 22 not to be carried forward. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. You didn't, I forgot it. Okay, we're gonna start over, all right? All right, do I have a motion to approve? So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of approving the move of the operations fund to be carried forward, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Colleen, for keeping me straight. We will now move on to the budget appropriation transfers. Recommended the board adopt the attached appropriation transfer resolution. Mr. McMichael.
Yes, this is also a year-end process that we routinely do from the time the budgets are put together until about 18 months later when we're at the end of the process. A number of things can happen. In this case, what we're doing here is transferring appropriations, so we're not spending any more, any less money, and has no impact to the taxpayer or anything. It's just we may have, for example, made a change in where we charge certain expenses from within that budget, and then that will result in the receiving account being understated, and where we moved it from will be overstated, and that's why you see increases and then corresponding decreases. So it's just a year-end process that but we can't have an account in the red under the requirements, and so it's balancing those appropriations, and so that we don't end up closing the year with accounts that are in a negative.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the attached appropriation transfer?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Discussion. Any questions? All right. All those in favor of recommending the attached appropriation transfer, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. We will now move with the recommendation to adopt a resolution to authorize us to advertise notices for public hearing for February 13th and February 27th. Mr. McMichael.
Thank you. I got ahead of myself on the board report. At the December meeting, the administration presented proposed facility projects for 2023 for Carmel High School as well as various other schools. You have that report as a part of your board documents. In order to consider at least moving forward with those projects, we need to go through a process to obtain the funding, and in this case, it's anticipated that these projects would be funded with what's referred to as a lease rental bond. I won't get into a big story about bonds, but there are basically two types in Indiana. What's called a general obligation bond, which is a direct liability to the school corporation, and then on larger projects, it's a lease rental bond where a holding corporation is essentially formed for the sole purpose of doing these projects in this case. And so, but in order to sell debt, you go through a process of public hearings, because of course it's public money, and to give taxpayers and anybody else in the community opportunity to comment on either they could be in favor or opposed or whatever they would like to say about the proposed funding, really. And also there's a lease involved. And so that's what this process is. It requires 2 hearings. But related to this, I want to point out that because the next item you're going to have is bid awards for the activity center at the high school. And so after receiving those bids, they came in over the initial estimate, which financially we can manage because we're proposing to include another project that was within the bond that's paying for the activity center, and that was a general obligation bond, proposing to include it in these projects or as a part of this bond. And so, so that project has been added to your list of facility projects to be done out of what we're calling the 2023 lease rental bond. And however, and with that change, it will not increase the tax rate, and we're not anticipating that it'll increase the payoff of this bond. We're anticipating this bond to be paid off in 8 years, which in the public sector, that's really quick. It's not unusual that they're 25 years or more. And so, so we're recommending that you authorize us to advertise for the hearing. So you're not acting on the process just yet. That's the whole point, is to get public input. And you heard some comments this evening, for example. And so, to consider the public's comments prior to making your final decisions.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt, to advertise for notices?
Can I ask a question?
Almost. After we motion and second, then it'll be discussion, and you can ask all the questions you want.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve the resolution? Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Greg, go ahead.
Just to clarify, and I think you made it pretty clear that what we're voting on tonight is just to have a hearing. It's not to approve any funding or bonds.
Correct.
Or any of the projects. It's just a formality just to proceed on with the next steps of bringing public comment in and consideration.
Yes, that's correct.
One other question too, the $5.5 million obligation going into the lease bond, is that included in the $39 million?
Yes, it is. What was presented in December was $34 million.
Any other questions from the board? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still considering this recommendation. One of the things that I,
This is just for the hearing, not the other one.
no, I think I'm unclear on when is the best time for the board to be aligned? Is it after we voted for the hearing and we have questions, or is it before we vote on the hearing?
So,
For these projects?
Yeah.
Well, if the majority of the board was not even potentially supportive of moving forward with the projects, then there'd be no point in the majority of the board advertising it for a hearing to consider, these projects.
Okay, so that's why I'm bringing up, I'm still trying to get clarity on the recommendation. So what I was gonna ask was, if the board would want to have a tour of the area where we are trying to get the renovation kind of approved or through. So I've been kind of asking questions of community members or folks that would be impacted by the renovation, such as students, just to get a feel for what the experience is in the area the renovation would be made. And so I was like, oh, it might be a good idea for us to kind of check out the area so we know where we're investing the funds, right? What the current lay of the land is what I was putting on the table.
Now, these particular projects, there is some renovation. For example, in the radio and TV area, a majority of are you suggesting the high school?
Yeah.
Because the total,
Yes.
all the projects they're at significant amounts at the high school, but they're also at several other schools.
Yes, I'm really thinking about the high school, just a couple of the projects we have in the works. I think it would be beneficial to kind of see what's in place so we understand, well, those of us that would like to have a better understanding of the
Sure.
investment, we understand what the dollars are going to go to.
Right.
So I'm not necessarily against a hearing. I just thought that it'd be good for board members who might have questions to have a clearer understanding of the investment, and
Sure.
it might be beneficial to have a little bit of a tour or something like that.
So I'll, real quick, so
Yeah.
definitely, we can definitely do that. One of the good things about kind of the processes in place is it takes a while. So we have tonight we vote on the authorization to have the hearing. We have to have 2 separate hearings, which happen in the month of February, and then it comes back again, and then we have discussion and then action. So we definitely have time before it gets to the point where we're making decisions in order to schedule those, which we've done in the past. Like we've done tours of buildings and like we did it for the elementary schools and all that different things. So it's very doable and something that we've done. So I think that with the time allotted, we do have time, if we do move forward to the public hearing to get input more from the community, we also as a board can go and look at this and ask questions and get more information before we need to make a decision.
Makes sense. I think I heard Roger just say, if the board is not aligned, it might not make sense to approve a hearing for the advertisement. So that's kind of why I was asking questions.
Yeah, that sounds good. Any other questions or comments? All right, so we are now going to vote on approving the hearing to get the process started for that. All those, the advertisement, we're voting to advertise the hearing. Goodness, okay, thank you. So if you would like to vote to support the advertisement of the public hearings that are set for February 13th and February 27th regarding facility improvement projects and related matters, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, 4-1. We will now move forward with the bid award with the Greyhound High School Activity Center.
And my question on these, I think we have one. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a bid award. I keep doing that instead of change orders. But, so let me get to that. I was going to suggest whether you wanted to group them, but not the bid award. So this is a bid award for contracts relative to the Activity Center project. I think there was one question earlier, and you can see there are these various categories are numbered, and so starting with number 2, and the question is, what was number 1, or what is number 1? And number 1 is this is what's referred to as a pre-engineered structural steel building, and so the steel portion of this building was the bids for that were awarded previously. I don't remember exactly what meeting. I think in November, I believe, and we sold a general obligation bond to cover the cost, as I had said earlier, to cover the cost of this building along with a couple other projects, and so that portion of the building bid has already been awarded. You can see in the report that we're now recommending bid awards for, I think it's 9 different categories. There are 2 categories still that we did not bring, we took bids on, but there were issues with those 2. And so we're not recommending award of those 2 bids at this time. And so they're the final 2 bids. And in your report, it shares with you what they're about, and it's about the artificial turf as well as glass and glazing. So they're not included in these bids. So these bids are a total of $9,816,655. And we, as I'd said earlier, I wanted to be clear that with regard to the cost and the additional cost, that is not something typical for us or any other school district, I don't think. And as I said, this project came in higher than what was initially estimated. Turned out it was 2 things. It was the site conditions, and by that I mean that the location of this building is at a different grade than what's in front of it, which this is on the northeast side, north of the varsity stadium or football field. And so it's a 7 or 8 feet difference in height, and that has site cost implications in order to provide ramps to get people and equipment and vehicles and so forth, because building, like for performing arts, for example, with all the band equipment, they need to have, major types of equipment to get access to this building. And then we all know about the high inflation rate, highest in 40 years and so forth. And that's had a meaningful impact on about everything that we're doing. And of course, we're all experiencing that in our own personal lives as well. So those are the 2 issues, and I wanted to be clear about how we're responding to that financially before you took action with regard to these bids.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to award the bid for the Carmel High School Greyhound Activity Center? Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Board questions?
Yeah,
Greg?
excuse me, we had some discussion earlier with some email. I had some questions about the bid, and you'd addressed it pretty well here a minute ago. The question I do have on the funding, though, is this monies that already exist that we're allocating for this, or I'm not sure where the
Yes.
$10 million
Short answer is yes. We sold a general obligation bond, or the board did, to fund this project, and you have to have the money in hand. You cannot award bids. You can't even advertise for bids prior to about 60 days prior to obtaining the money, and you certainly cannot award bids until you actually have the money in hand. So we do, of course, have the money with that what we refer to as the 2022 general obligation bond.
So the $5.5 million that we talked about on the other item, we're going to pick that up in the lease bond that we're going to be talking about in coming meetings. So we did have a surprise here, which I understand with the inflation that we're experiencing, but so I just wanted to point that out, that the $5.5 million is, we need to fund that, and it's not here to approve, but will be if we approve the lease bond.
Yes, and I also want to emphasize that we cannot do like half a project and hope we sell a next bond to do the other half. So when we move, what I'm referring to is, we call it the South End Zone building, because that's one of the projects proposed in the 2023 proposed projects and the related lease rental bond. If the board, or for whatever reason, that bond was not sold, then of course we would not do that project. And so each project has to stand on its own as related to financing. You can't sell one bond and build half the building or half of the project and then hope you sell the second one. That's happened in Indiana. but the outcome's not what you would want. So, and so we would not do that, and we would never bring that concept to the school board because we know it's prohibited.
But at this time, we're $5.5 million shy of what we need to finish the project. But we
No.
don't-
The general obligation bond that's funding this project was intended to fund this project and that south concession building. And so what we're saying is we're essentially recommending that we proceed to finish this project at the expense of a building that's not there.
Okay.
And we still think we need that building, and thus we've included it in the next proposed bond issue. But we have the money, by not doing that project, we have the money to cover the cost of this project.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes,
Ms.
so, yes, I'm really trying to understand the renovation. I know we were slated to spend 9 million, and due to inflation and just changes in costing
Yes.
around construction, we're at 14 million, so there's a difference of 5 million, I understand that. And I'm also for my students and families having access to awesome facilities. I just want to make sure, since this is an additional 5 million for the renovation, I just want to do due diligence and really understanding what we're doing, and if all that we're doing must be prioritized right now when the costs are, exorbitant. So I don't know with this particular renovation, what it is we could like
When you say
visually
renovation,
see,
you mean
or
this building?
this update, yeah, this
building.
this piece, yes. Like, can we see what the current state is right now so we can see what we're doing, or is it,
There is no building.
oh, this is
Doesn't
the brand new,
exist.
I thought we were
Yeah, that's
updating
where I
like the restrooms, and is that a different one?
Yes.
Let me
that
try,
would-
let me try a little clarification here.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to go really big picture here. So Roger, if I make you nervous, I'm apologizing in advance. You have a tax rate, and right now we haven't changed that tax rate. I can't, way before me, it's been this exact same tax rate. And what happens is we have buildings that we've built, and so we take loans out, and that tax rate pays those loans. Then some of the older projects where we had, like you said, this one's going to be 8 years, so maybe 8 years ago, now those are falling off, and so we no longer paying for those. So what we do is we're doing another bond to either renovate, which is a lot of times we'll do buildings that are getting dilapidated or maybe the program changes and we need to add space or do different things. We'll backfill where that fell off with a new project. So in this case, this project was supposed to be about $9 million.
9.5.
And $9.5 million. And we had gotten a bond, which was probably, what, about $15 million or so?
22.8.
$22.8 million. And then we had put in what projects we wanted to achieve with that. And so we went and we built this building, and the estimates were off because of inflation, and also we had a lot of site work that we didn't anticipate, I guess, at that time. So so in order to, we're going to spend that money in that bond, we're just going to use all that 15 million of that just for this building that we're bidding on right now. And so the two other buildings that were in that package are now being pushed out of that package to a different package. And then we'll contemplate that package. That's what you just voted to advertise for the hearing for that. So that's kind of how the pieces go to it. So this building is being built. We bought the steel already, which was great because we bought it early because there's always a lag time on that, so it doesn't delay the building of it. But that's kind of how it works. So the big picture, where our big boundary for the board and the district is we're not going to mess with the tax rate. We're not going to raise that tax rate. But we could work within the windows that we have of available money to build buildings, and Carmel's always been in a very favorable position to do that, because the community here expects top ranked, top, buildings put in really that are maintained very well, and we bring things to the board that we think are needed for the students and
the families here that want their kids to get a good quality education and good facilities. So, and being stewards of those facilities and of those tax dollars is a big part of our job. And so that's what the pieces are. So this particular piece is to get this building built, and we can't build it unless the money's there, and the money is there. So now it's just a matter of going forward into the next segment if you want to try to, if you have concerns over that $5.5 million, because now that's projected out to a different lease bond. So that makes sense. Greg kind of nailed it on the way in, but that's kind of the overall picture of it. Does that make sense?
The closest building, since this doesn't exist, you can't look at it, is the new Carmel Dad's Club Field House. So this is going to be smaller, but this is a very similar structure. So I don't know if you had an opportunity to see that before, but it's like the same idea. Is that
I think that's
accurate?
where the boys play volleyball, right?
Right beside us, just to the east of this building.
It's right
in the
here
back.
at Carmel Dad's Club.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
The answer is yes, that's where they played.
And the short answer is that this building is the same design as that building. We toured that building, and it had elements that we needed for our program, but it also has elements that we don't need for our program. So that building is almost twice the size as the one that we're proposing, or that we're building. A couple other things comments I'd like to make, just to be maybe add some clarification. One is anytime you have cost overruns, what we have here is not, that building is not worth what we're paying for it, but we have, if the estimate had been closer to begin with, we would still recommend that we build this building. It's a tremendous value for the benefit that the kids will get for years to come. And you heard a lengthy presentation prior to asking you to approve us moving forward with this. So none of that has changed. Secondly, we did receive multiple bids, which there was a time where we were not. We would have $1 million project and get one bidder. And so when you have 5 or 6 bids on the major categories, and 2 or 3 of them are very close together, what that tells you is this is what it costs to build this building. And we talk about things like, are there certain things that we should wait on? The problem is with that is you think about your house, for example. They typically don't go down; they go up. They just usually don't go up in double digits in a year. But over time, the long term, inflation occurs, and it occurs in construction as well. So there's certain things like that were, paving or had to do with oil or something that you thought, well, this is going to get better, and microchips or something, and the cost will come down. But those are very specific in our exceptions. So I just wanted to be clear that this is just what this building costs today. And as much as anything, it's the initial estimate that was understated, because at that point, the inflation for sure had not occurred. And that estimate was created based on the Dad's Club building, which is not typical, because typically we're starting from scratch with a building and or renovating it. But here they took the design from an existing building and then scaled it down. And so that did not, though, take into, we knew that, they would have known the site conditions were different, but until you start designing the building, getting into specifics, and saying, oh, well, we have to bring in trucks to bring in band instruments, for example, and the Dad's Club doesn't do that, so they have different conditions. And so you get in, as you work through that design process and get into more detail, sometimes that's an example of something that comes out of it. And then the inflation was just, once in every 40-year kind of thing.
Any other? Greg?
Yeah, refresh me on the amount of the increase over the original estimate. It's pretty significant, like 50.
It is significant. It's about 58%. it went from, 9.5 million to right at 15 million.
Okay. But how long ago were those estimates done?
Oh, the, the, the 9 point, the initial estimate? Yeah.
Just roughly.
Over a year for sure. I can't, but I don't recall when we started. Yeah, actually, probably closer, probably 2 years because to get to this point, we still had to get it into develop specification, the design, our design, and then go through the design process and the architect's development of specifications and the bidding process. So yeah, it's probably closer to 2 years.
So it's pretty significant. I mean, the inflation's pretty significant, but we missed some things, which is understandable. Is there anything we learned going forward with new projects that we might do a little differently?
Oh, I don't know that there's anything we learned particularly, but I would tell you, for example, that bid category 1 on the steel, it came in 30% under the estimate. And one of the things that happens when you have times like this is the last thing the construction management company wants to do is have this happen. And so when you have prices increasing, one after the other, if anything, more often than not, their estimate will be high, not low. Because I've always tell them that I want it close, high or low. But if I had to pick one, it's less painful if it's a high estimate versus a low estimate like this. And so, but you can see that the same construction manager, same building, steel was 30% less than the estimate. So, and this was 50-some% more. So, which is also why, if you had asked me to place the bet on which way it would go, I would have said the estimate's going to be high, not low. But the real challenge is when pricing is changing, and I had shared this in writing to you, but when prices are changing this fast in construction, the estimator cannot rely on previous projects or anything that happened in the past, because whatever it cost last month, it costs more this month, and let alone if it's a year from now, and you have a year's worth of inflation or 2 years or whatever. So a big component of the estimating process is not reliable when you're in those conditions. So.
Well, I noticed you had a lot of bids on some of those items, so that's good to know that you've got some competition on them.
Yes, because we also went through a time earlier. Hopefully this is indicative of things to come, but we've had more than one bid over the last couple of years where I remember we had to do a boiler project, for example, at the high school, and it was over $1 million. We had one bidder, and you read about this in many cases, but contractors are finding it difficult to have enough help, be able to employ enough people and qualified people, and so which is why in many cases they have all the work they can handle. Thus, they don't bid on a project because they don't have the wherewithal to do it. And if they do bid, they're going to bid really high because if they don't get this one, they'll get the next one. So it's a challenging time. But our needs don't go away just because of that.
Any other questions from the board? Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, both Dr. B and Roger, because this is 3 of us who, the 2 that are brand new, and then myself who came on during the pandemic, have had very little experience with, or any experience with new builds of this magnitude. And so I think I can probably speak for all of us that thank you so much for your patience and your openness in explaining everything so that we can understand how these processes work.
Well, it's hard to get your arms around it, but I mean, we have about $150 million worth of construction going on right now, and that's not unusual for us. And that doesn't minimize the $5 million in any way, but it's in a very large context. That's also why we're fortunate that we have the financial wherewithal and ability to manage this type of a situation and not have it be just completely detrimental to the taxpayers.
Roger, do we foresee any plans that we might have made for this lease rental bond? It's a tongue twister.
Yep.
Do we foresee any opportunities that we might have leveraged that bond to kind of be devoted to being impacted by using that $5 million out of that bucket? Meaning, is there anything we're going to have to forego as a result of using the $5 million?
No, there's not. That's why we added that project to this bond. Thus, it increased from 34 to the initial estimate increased from 34 million to 39 million to account for it. So the short answer is no. We didn't have to trade one project for another.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Just a couple things, just for the record, because we did receive 30 bids on this, which is really good. And then this is we're kind of at the bid award. I kind of just wanted to also is for that next bond, the reason why the estimates take so long and we're so far away is because of all the things that we do in order to get to this bid award point. Like for the other bond, we're just starting that process with the public hearings and all that stuff, and so it's really just part of a long process. And now we're at the point we're kind of more toward the end of that process with awarding the bids for construction to begin. So I just kind of wanted to, since we just did the other thing, I just wanted to kind of show you that's kind of the beginning of it, and this is now toward the end of this project. Right. Any other questions? All right. All those in favor of supporting the award all those in favor of the recommendation of the award, the bid for the Carmel High School Greyhound Activity Center, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Could I make one more point before this gets, away? Just to make sure everybody understands that the tax rate will not go up as a result of any of these. So don't worry about your taxes as far as that's concerned. And the other point is that this money that is in bonds cannot be spent on anything but buildings. And so this can't be used like to pay teacher salaries or to pay the only money this money can only be spent on buildings, and you can only do bonds to build things and the furnishings that go in them. So a lot of times we get confused about money. Well, this is taking a loan to build a building and to furnish it, and that's the only way the money can only be spent that way. So it's kind of school funding's kind of there's like two big pieces, and the two cannot mix. So just clarification there. Just get it out there.
Perfect.
Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you. All right. We will now move on to bike racks. We will 5.5 change orders for the district-wide bike rack improvements. Mr. McMichael.
So do you want to take these one at a time, or would you prefer to group these? There's four change orders.
Let's do them all at once. So let me take a motion. Let me take a motion to do 5.5, 5.6, 5.7, and 5.8 all at once. Mr. McMichael will then discuss them, and then we can vote. Do I have a motion to take all the 5.5 to 5.8 together? So moved. Second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Greg? Okay. 5-1. Motion carries. All right. Mr. McMichael, if you'd like to explain all those.
Yeah. So the first one was related to the natatorium edition, and it's actually
The bike racks.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm one down. I wanted to get to the deduct change order. Actually, this one is too. This is actually what we refer to as a closeout change order. Had to do with installing bike racks around the school district, and it's a deduct change order of just over $3,000. Then the second one is related to the high school natatorium project, And it's also a deduct of 27, just over 27.8 million, or $1,000, not million. I wished it was million. And then the next one is also a deduct, and it's $3.6 thousand. And see what that's for. That's has to do with heating and ventilation replacement project at the high school. And then finally, we have an ad. It's a big ad relative to the others, but it's for the Performing Arts Project, and it's the change orders are $206,802. However, 71,000, a little over 71,000 of that is being charged back to other contractors. So the net addition is $134,929. That's the 4 change orders.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve change orders 5.5 to 5.8?
So moved.
Second? Discussion. Any questions? Greg?
Yeah, just a question on the, so the net overrun on that last item is, you said 134,000?
Yes.
If you could explain a little bit about that. I don't know the relationship to the total amount of these projects, if it's
Yeah, the
significant.
project itself was near $25 million. Okay. And to put it in context. And so these aren't overruns per se. There's a listing for each one that that describes specifically, and there's multiple different changes, but there's detail in your report that addresses the specifics of what they're about, including whether or not they were back charged to a different contractor.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand the significance of it or insignificance of it in relation to the total amount spent. So it's fairly low?
Yes.
I guess I would say. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Please signify to approve change orders 5.5 to 5.8. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. We'll now move on to our discussion portion of our meeting, which is the requests for use of Carmel Elementary, Main Street, and River Road property for parks purposes. Mr. McMichael.
Thank you. We've been in conversation with representatives from the Parks Department. This evening we have Michael Klitzing, the CEO of the Parks Department. And there's 2 projects that the city is wanting to, asking that we could partner with. One is a Chinese garden, and Michael will give you more information here in a minute, but first is the Chinese garden, which would be located on the Carmel Elementary site. If you're at all familiar with that site, there's about 0.4 acres that is right next to the library's new parking garage. And if you see, and you'll see the location, but you might, if you just drove by there, you might assume it was the library's property, but it's actually owned by the school district. And you may be familiar that the city of the Carmel City has a Japanese garden as already, and this there's a donor that's interested in donating money for a Chinese garden. So that's one project, and the second project is a dog park, which would be located on roughly Main Street and River Road. The school, if you're familiar, on 126th Street, we have soccer fields, but the school district owns 80 acres starting at 126th Street, going north to Main Street, and then it runs along River Road and then the neighborhood to the west. So we're talking about the far north end of this property and also tending to be toward the west. And the concept would be is that the school district would permit the Parks Department to develop these 2 projects at those 2 locations. And essentially, we would provide the property, and they they would cover the expense to actually develop it. But we would, a part of the agreement would be that if the school ever needed that property, we would, of course, have first priority, and so they would risk their investment in that if we needed it for something, that we would still have control of the property. We would not take that lightly, of course, and in fact would try to assist them if it was necessary to relocate. I think that's pretty remote, particularly for the Chinese garden. But and we do not see this property as that it would be detrimental for school purposes. But we do think that it would be a asset and a benefit to the community. And in this case, you're talking about two governmental entities, so the taxpayers paid for the property to begin with, and they would pay. Well, in this case, the Chinese garden would be a donation, but the dog park, I believe, would be use tax dollars to develop that. And with that, I'll ask Michael to present more specifics with regard to at least the concept of what would be available.
Thank you, Roger. And I want to begin by thanking the school board for the incredible collaboration that we've had with Carmel Clay Schools. Obviously, we have a strong relationship with the Extended School Enrichment Program. We have worked very closely with administration over the years. We have always had a shared board member as well. Three of you have, one is currently serving and two have served in the past. So we certainly appreciate that relationship that we have and look forward, regardless of how we move forward with this, to maintaining that incredible relationship. I do want to stress tonight we're not asking for permission to actually build any specific thing, but what we do want to do is have this conversation with the school board to make sure before we invest a lot of time on coming up with more refined concepts for future presentation to the school board and also to the park board, that we're on the same page and there's consensus that we at least explore this as a potential for the location. So we're not asking for your consent to absolutely develop it, but we are, looking for a consensus ultimately that it's okay for us to continue to explore it as a potential to bring ultimately back to the school board and to the park board for final approval if it's determined to be feasible. So the first thing is the Chinese garden. To give a little bit of background with that, we do have a Japanese garden that is located immediately south of City Hall. And recently, actually, there's part of a stormwater management program. The city and the township are expanding that property. You'll see the pond currently north of Carmel Drive. And at one point, we were looking at potentially making that a sister cities garden so that we could celebrate all of the cities, various sister cities around the world. But ultimately, it was determined that that location was best to maintain for a Japanese portion, and that means we're looking for potential locations for the other sister cities, first working with our Chinese sister city, Xiangyang in Hubei. So what we were looking for specifically is a location that would be within the central core of the city, in relative close distance to the Arts and Design District, to the Monon Greenway, so that visitors to the city, so residents that are using the Monon, would have close proximity, an easy walk, if you will, to the Chinese garden if we can find a location. And as working with the city of Carmel in the planning area, one of the areas that we identified as potentially large enough for a Chinese garden is the location that Roger was explaining, on the north side of the Carmel Elementary School property, immediately south of the new parking structure for the Carmel Clay Public Library. We actually identified there's a bigger triangle, which on the map is identified as one, which is where we would envision ultimately developing the primary portion of the garden. That would be the area that we would envision the public coming to. Areas 2 and 3 on the map could be not necessarily where we have pathways for the public to come into, but sort of serve as a backdrop for the main portion of the garden. In preliminary conversations with administration, we know that we want to maintain strong sight lines with the elementary school. We want to minimize traffic that's going, pedestrian traffic that's going across the interior drive into the school. So that's sort of how we prioritize locations and backdrops with it. What we would do, we don't have specific designs or concepts to share with you tonight other than the proposed location. If the school board is amenable to us to explore this as a potential location, What we would do is we have already worked with Purdue University and their landscape architecture program, which is in the forest or the School of Agriculture at Purdue. We would work with their landscape architect, one of their professors, and with some of their students, and they would come up with a concept that we could present to the school board at a later meeting, most likely March or April at the latest, so that they could do it as a project this semester. They would actually solicit public input. They would work with some of the members in the Chinese community as well as other key stakeholders. They'd be talking, of course, to some of the key individuals here at Carmel Clay Schools, with the principal at Carmel Elementary School, to make sure that we understand school needs and priorities. We would be talking very closely with Carmel Clay Public Library, because even though it's not their property, it is immediately adjacent to them. We'd be talking with some of the city planners as well and other key stakeholders. As Roger indicated, we do have a donor that would contribute at least a portion of the construction of this. We would likely have to find additional funding through the city, but that's where we're kind of at this point. And before I signed the contract with Purdue to continue those discussions, I wanted to make sure that this was something that the school board would be open to us further exploring. And like I said, we'd be bringing it back to you once we have the concepts. I can report that there are going to be 4 students that are current landscape architecture students. One of them is a graduate of Carmel High School. So I suggested that we would really like her to come back to make that presentation with the professor. So with that, I'd be happy to address any questions the board has regarding the proposed Chinese garden.
Any questions regarding the garden? Okay. Nope, not at this time. Thank you.
Very good.
Michael, I want to make sure there's at the ranked #1 Purdue Boilermakers that we're talking about, the same. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. B, that would be the number
that's,
one.
That's the Purdue you're talking about.
That would be the same Purdue, yes.
Yeah,
Sir.
okay, thank you.
Yes. As a Illinois alum, that hurts a little bit, but. The second item that I wanted to bring forward for your discussion, and like similar consent for continued investigation, is the use of the Main Street and River Road property for public purposes, predominantly for a dog park, but not exclusively for a dog park. To give you a little bit of background with regard to this, currently the park system has one dog park, which is located in Central Park. It's roughly 3.5 acres. We have roughly 650 dog members within that, and we have a waiting list for that facility of over 600 dogs. So we know that there's strong demand within the community for a dog park. Every 5 years, we do a new comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan, in which we get public input, work with stakeholders, do a statistically valid public survey, and additional dog park is something that continues to rank very highly as one of the needs of the park system. We're about ready to go into a new master plan, so we'll be validating that along, hopefully, with review of this specific site. But knowing the wait list we have for the dog park, knowing that the statistics as far as the number of dog adoptions that we had since COVID, I think it's like 1 in every 6 households in the United States has adopted a dog or a pet since COVID. We know that in the first year of the pandemic, I think there were over 8 million dogs throughout the country that were, brought into households. Obviously not all of them in Carmel, but many of them in Carmel. So we know that the demand exists. So we're looking for a location for a second dog park, and actually ideally a third dog park. We have a potential location on the west side, but we're looking for an appropriate location on the east side. When we developed the original dog park in Central Park, we did a feasibility study at that time, and we identified it talking with other park systems and communities that have dog parks, as well as just looking at the logistics of a dog park, some key criteria that we consider as we look for a location for subsequent dog parks. One is we don't want to put a dog park in someone's backyard. So we try to make sure that, and if you look at the Central Dog Park, for example, we have no immediate residence to it. The closest residents are across 116th Street from it. So when we were looking at this particular property, the closest residents are across River Road from it. And actually, if you think about it, you have River Road, you have the White River Greenway, which in here is represented by the green line, and you also have an interior drive before you get to the closest residence. So there's a pretty significant buffer between those roads, between this property and the closest homes. When you go to the north, William Connor Way, in that subdivision there's common area, the road, and then the home. So again, quite a distance before you get to the closest home. So that sort of clicks one of the criteria we're looking for. We're looking for ideally at least 1 acre, more ideally closer to 5 acres, so that the more property we have, it gives us the ability to have the chance to put a portion of it in to rest, because the dogs and the people that are using them, it can be pretty intense in areas, so you do have to allow times for the turf to rejuvenate, just kind of like sports fields as well. So, we're looking for that as well. Proximity to trails is a good thing. It's right across from the White River Greenway, which we will be expanding this year. Currently, the trail ends a little bit south of Prairie View Elementary School. We'll be extending it all the way to 146th Street. This trail network will be every bit as extensive as the Monon Greenway, so it'll have close trail connectivity to a major trail system within the community. So that's another thing that we're looking for, as well as the ability to have close proximity to utilities, and we know that utilities are served in this particular area. We did work with Y Engineering. Michael Krischel, which is one of the designers that we work with, was also involved in the design of the original dog park, came up with a rough concept. I want to stress that this is not what we're proposing exactly to develop, but this is to give an illustrative idea of what we could do for tonight's discussion, is looking at how we could use the property for dog parks as well as maybe some additional amenities, including trails, because we know the number one request that we have within our community for recreational amenities is trails. So we looked at the opportunity with roughly 50 acres of the site that is currently undeveloped for potential location of some passive recreation trails. And also in conversations with administration as well as our own surveying, we know that there could be potential need for like a community garden, and this location certainly has enough space for that. So that's sort of what we're envisioning could potentially go on here. One of the things that we tried to do too is, we want to make sure that it's very visually appealing location. So we tried to make sure that like any parking that we need to support the amenities here is tucked further into the site, so you're not seeing it directly from the road. The folks that live in the Prairie View subdivision aren't seeing that parking lot right across the street from them, so wanted to tuck it in. The actual dog park itself is largely grass. It has fencing, and we would propose a nice fencing along River Road so that's very pastoral and very attractive. And most of the site, we're actually looking to keep in a very natural state. So keeping it very similar to what it is, but maybe enhancing, especially in that northeast corner, the prairies there, so that it provides more habitat, especially for pollinators. To give some ideas of what this really looks like, this is an area of the existing dog park in Central Park. You can see, the fenced-in areas that we have in this particular area. Part of it is mulch, the rest of it is irrigated natural turf. We have an area where the people come in close proximity to parking, restroom facility. Zooming in a little bit on the entry area, which is a key component of any dog park, is an area that we typically refer to as a bullpen, so that you don't have dogs easily escape. You have kind of a controlled fenced area where people come in, and then there's additional gates that get you into the respective areas. So that way you don't have dogs darting out, either in or out, and it allows for a little bit more control. We typically put a little concrete there because that's a heavy traffic area so that you don't have mud. Like I said, restroom facilities close by. All the restrooms that we now develop within the park system are heated restrooms so that they can be open year-round. We do have people using the dog park at Central Park year-round as well. Examples of what a dog park looks like. So here's, again, the Central Dog Park. That is not my dog, but it looks very similar. Again, fencing, so I would envision decorative fencing in places that are more visible to the road or the entry point. And other places we would use sort of a wood top with fencing that kind of disappears You always see wood at the bottom too because the smaller dogs can get underneath it. So we're making sure that we don't have any escape artists getting out of the dog park. We do try to provide various amenities for the public in there, including shade type structures, so we could potentially build shelters or other shade structures in there where people will congregate on a hot day, or if it starts raining, a place where they can seek shelter as well. It's important to note that dog parks, of course, they're for the dogs, but they're equally there for the people. So there's a lot of socialization that happens amongst the dog owners, or dog parents sometimes referred to. So anyway, it is not just about the dogs. It's also very much about the residents that own the dogs. We also could envision some agility courses like we have in Central Park. And then one of the things that's unique about our dog park, and something that we would implement if we do ultimately move forward with a location here, or any location for that matter, is we are probably one of the only public dog parks that has a DNA system for our dogs. The Central Dog Park, as well as this particular location, is within a floodplain. And this location, it's the the Vestal ditch that goes through there. It looks like a creek. It empties into the White River, which obviously is a major water source for the greater community, not necessarily for Carmel, but for the greater Indianapolis area, a major water supply. So we're wanting to make sure that we're not putting contaminants into it. We also know that from talking to other dog parks, or actually all you have to do is go on the Monon and you'll see this issue as well, people don't always pick up after their dogs. And we want to encourage that so, again, the contaminants aren't going into the watershed, as well as infecting other visitors to the dog park. So we require all of our dog members to get a DNA testing. It's a little swab that we send off to a lab. And if they do not pick up, we will actually test the left behind presence. And if we have a match, we will find the participants, and they either pay or they're kicked out of the dog park. So the idea is not to assess fines. The idea is to encourage positive behavior. Since we opened the dog park in 2014, I think we have maybe 20 to 30 fines. Everyone has been paid because, again, like I said, we have a wait list of over 600 dogs. So people want to maintain that membership. But it is something that was unique. It always gets chuckles, but it actually has a very serious purpose, and it has been a system that has proven to work. We're not looking to make money off of it. We only charge the fines represent the cost of getting the testing. But it has been a very effective program, and we have one of the cleanest dog parks in the country. In addition to the dog park, because of the wooded area that's in there, as well as the grassy areas, we envision trails very similar to what we have on the east side of Central Park. This is in the East Woods, soft surface trails, so this is an aggregate trail, a very pastoral walk through the woods. Some places there might need to be boardwalks because there are some wetlands within that area, but experience very similar to this. Again, the #1 request that we have from the public within the parks is additional trails. We can connect this to the neighbors if they are so inclined to do so. If not, that's fine. We would then not do so. Additionally, we could connect it to the soccer fields, so parents and families that are practicing or enjoying those amenities would be able to enjoy the trail networks here as well. And then, like I said, it has the potential to be a location for a community garden, very similar to the community garden that exists at Carmel Middle School. We could even develop a partnership very similar to what exists there, so that it's student-led volunteers and parents that are helping to provide that asset for the community. And that takes us back to the overarching plan. Again, these aren't necessarily exactly where we would propose things. It's more illustrative so that you can see what this could look like. Additionally, we did investigate, for example, putting the parking and more the dog park experience over here. But I did have some preliminary conversations with the city of Carmel and with engineering. This area here actually, oops. This area, this black line here, actually represents the floodway, which is a lot more restrictive as to what you can build within it. They weren't very excited about having a parking lot or contaminants from the dog park within the floodway. So This allows us to stay out of the floodway. It might be within the floodplain, but they're not as concerned about that. So we did investigate some potential other locations, and the reason we landed for this initial proposal is in that area is because it's taking into consideration the topography of the land and the site limitations there. If the board is willing for us to consider, continue down this discovery path to see if this is a viable location for it, our next step would be to have some community meetings, invite the neighbors so that we're getting their feedback on it. We would present a plan very similar to this. We would have illustrative examples of what it looks like. We would get their feedback as to what they like or maybe what they don't like. We can take that feedback into it, make any appropriate adjustments, and then ultimately bring it back to the school board and, like I said, to the park board as well for your consent before we would ever move forward with development of the site. With that, I'd be happy to address any questions you have regarding the dog park, and if there's more technical ones, I have Michael Krischel here to assist me with that as well.
Thank you. Questions from the board? No? Okay. So this is just a discussion item for us tonight. So you guys continue to look at these things. You can get with me kind of if you have anything further, and then I can share that with administration on next steps, if that sounds good. Thank you so much for coming and visiting us, and we look forward to kind of, next steps.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And likewise, if there's any questions, feel free to funnel them to Roger or contact me directly, and I'm happy to address any questions the board may have.
Will do.
Again, thank you for your time and
Thank you.
consideration.
We will now move on to the proposed change to the 2023-2024 calendar. Dr. Michael Beresford.
I get to talk about exciting stuff, solar eclipse. So on April 8th of next year, 2024, there's going to be a solar eclipse that passes over North America. And there's always a line, and the line is where there will be total darkness. And that line attracts a lot of people because they want to be where, and I've seen a video of it, it's really pretty cool, that where we get the total darkness. So the day will turn into dark for about 3.5 minutes. So that's the good news. That line goes right through Indianapolis and right through Carmel, Indiana. And so we're going to get to see that. It's going to start about 2:50 p.m. and then there'll be total darkness from about 3:06 till about 3:09 or so, something like that. So it's going to be a really big deal. Because of our location, in Indianapolis, probably there's I think Dallas and Indianapolis are the two largest cities that the line's going to go through this time. We're expected to have minimally 500,000 extra people around, up to 2 million. So those of you that are thinking right now, I'm going to Airbnb my house, it's a really good idea because it's going to be a big, big deal. I actually experienced this the last time, what was it, 16 was it, I think maybe, when that happened. And they actually had signs on the highway that said, do not stop on the eclipse. And they said it didn't matter, they all did, and the traffic backed up. It took hours to get out of there. So based on that happens to be the Monday after spring break. So that's typically our first day back after spring break. And so, of course, it makes us nervous about transportation because of the timing of it. Our elementary kids would be on the bus, and then our middle school and high schoolers would be in school. And after discussing with our administrative team and just discussing it, we thought it's probably not a great idea to have school on that day. Just because of all the unknowns included. So what we're proposing is that typically we take the Friday off before spring break, that we go to school on that Friday, and then we take Monday off instead so that we can avoid, all the possible things that could happen as a result of the solar eclipse. And families can get together and experience total darkness for 3.5 minutes in the middle of the afternoon. So that's my discussion point there, and would bring this back as an action item maybe next school board meeting.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Okay. So just for clarification purposes, our spring break time would not change as far as days. It's really just flip-flopping a Friday for a Monday.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Oh, question.
Given that Carmel High has that big field and parking lot, have you thought about having that available for visitors?
Well, it's funny you should ask that. We actually we have like some folks that are really into astronomy, and our planetarium director, and I'm blanking, Keith Turner. He's actually working on a grant where they would actually send equipment to Carmel High School, and that they would use that because they study eclipses and the UV rays and the whole works. So we may actually have some super scientific stuff going on that day. Now, I recommended $60 a seat in the stadium, and that'd be a great fundraiser. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of opportunities for that. But precisely, that was one of the things we were worried about, that all of our parking lots would get filled up, by folks that are coming in to see the eclipse. So yeah, there'll be some opportunities, I'm sure.
Any other questions? Yeah, PTOs if you want to sell glasses. Remember those awkward things you have to wear? It's a good fundraiser idea too. All right, this is just for discussion tonight, so this will be brought forth for another meeting. All right, thank you. We will now move on to report staff and student services. Dr. O.
Good evening, President Browning, Dr. Beresford, and members of the board. This evening's Staff and Student Services report will be provided by Mrs. Roberts-Leonard, and she will be providing an update on our district's equity and inclusion efforts. Mrs. Roberts-Leonard.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, wait a minute. Good evening.
Good evening.
There we go. It's only, what, 7:28. We can't be that tired yet. As Dr. Ostrike said, I am Terry Roberts-Leonard. I have the distinct pleasure to serve as the district's Equity and Inclusion Officer. I have been here 2 calendar years, and I'm just going to give you an update on some of the wonderful things that we are doing. So this is just our mission statement. This is something that we brought about when I first came aboard in January of 2021. And this is just talking about how we really want to prepare our students for a global society. So what I'm going to do this evening in this presentation is I broke down kind of the things that we have been doing over the last 2 years into these various different categories. Now, it's important to note that many of these things overlap, okay? So I just placed them into the category that they would most easily go into. All right, so we'll start off with talking about what we're calling our 15 school solution. So this is just talking about how we set up our initial structure. So when we came, about 8 or 9 of our 15 schools had equity and inclusion teams, and now all of our schools have some sort of team at the school building level. All of those teams send somebody to the district meetings. We have elementary meetings and we have secondary meetings. Some of our great committee members are here this evening, so thanks for coming out tonight. We also have 3 of our elementary schools that have equity and inclusion teams through their PTOs, which were initiatives that they brought on and they wanted to do. We have something new this year, it's the Train the Trainer program. And so what this is we have something called the Excellence in Equity training series for staff members. And we have a level 1 and a level 2. And what I did this summer was I trained 8 staff members to be able to facilitate 3 of the 4 level 1 trainings. And so that allows for more flexibility, that allows for me to be more open to do more in-depth level 2 trainings and more trainings that are specific to the needs of those individual buildings. We realize there is some base level knowledge that we want everybody to have, but we also want to make sure that I'm available so that principals can have guided instruction on various topics that may be distinct for their particular buildings. So obviously, I am the primary contact to assist staff members in navigating issues as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and harassment. We did some equity audits over the summer. Dr. Beresford had an intern working on some advanced degrees, and they conducted equity audits for our middle schools. So I have that information, and I can get that information to you all if you all would like to review that. This is the Excellence and Equity series that I was talking about. As you can see, we have various topics. Examples are supporting foster and adoptive families, how to be an ally. We have a wide variety of topics. We did something this August that was also new, trying to do something new every year to see what best serves our staff and students, and it's called the Smart Start Training. So what this is we had a couple of fabulous team members come together and put together training specifically for our teachers to start the year off and teach them kind of how to make their classrooms the most inclusive place as possible. I thought it was really great because anytime teachers can teach teachers, I think that is the best way to go. I am over incident response when it comes to bias related incidents. So we have a heavy focus on that this year. So we are doing a lot of training, individual school staffs. We're doing trainings as the ESC and district administrators coming up in February as well. Stakeholder engagement, we this year started a student advisory team. So we already had a parent advisory team that we started last fall. This fall, we started a student advisory team. So this is just a great opportunity to be able to hear students' feedback, be able to get them engaged, run ideas by them. They take it back to their constituents, their classmates, and then they come back and we have some great conversations. We're also hosting secondary sessions at our middle schools and our high schools. So this is really a great opportunity for central office administrators to go into the buildings and talk to our secondary students. We've been to CHS so far, we've been to Clay, and we've been to Creekside, and we will be at Carmel Middle School in March. And those students are just really fabulous. We have a great time speaking with them. They talk about anything from SSRT time to hot dogs were a big hit over at Creekside. So it's just a great time, and they really give us some great feedback. Our Courageous Conversations series, hopefully a lot of you are familiar with this series. This is something where we bring in speakers, scholars, community leaders, and diversity professionals to talk about a wide variety of events that are going on in the world. So this is just a way to kind of keep people informed on things that are going on in our country in the realm of equity and inclusion. Community presentations, so I do Zoom workshops. I present to the PTO Coordinating Council. Just really want to get that information out there so everybody knows the great things that we are doing. I alluded to this earlier, our parent advisory group, so that's mentioned there. Then we also do read alouds for Heritage and History Month. Something that I make sure to impress upon our staff is that we should be celebrating everyone all year long, right? But when it comes to Heritage and History Months, I like to say it's kind of like a birthday. You're supposed to celebrate your life all year long, but when it's your birthday, you eating that cake, right? You're getting that ice cream, you're getting the gifts. It's an extra celebration. So that's what we like to do. And I am so grateful to our central office administrators who go into the buildings and really engage our students around these topics. Human resources, being able to work with Dr. Ostrike is always a treat. We are doing a lot to try to recruit and diversify our staff. So one thing that we're doing is trying to make connections with various HBCUs. So we've made some connections with Claflin universities in South Carolina, Kentucky State, Delaware State. I'm trying to leverage some of my connections. I spent 16 years in higher ed, so I know the president at Claflin, I know the VP at Delaware State. So trying to get in there and make those connections so that we can try to make Indianapolis a destination place. Looking at the statistics nationwide, teachers in the teaching profession is just not a really diverse profession. And so when you're trying to diversify your staff, you have to pull out all the stops and try to be creative as possible in what you are trying to do. We're also assisting in the inaugural diversity teacher recruitment fair that Dr. Ostrike is working on with 4 other districts. So that is coming up at the top of March. And then with collaborative engagement, I work a lot across the district. So something that's really, 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 really important to remember is that the work that I do is not in a box, right? And so equity and inclusion work is not an add-on. It is ingrained into the fabric of what we do, right? So that means that I'm working with our mental health coordinator, I'm working with curriculum instruction and assessment, I'm working with human resources, I'm working with all of these areas as we work together to be a seamless web of education for our students. Something that I created last spring is the Golden Greyhound Award. And so what this is this just in a way to recognize people who do exemplary work around equity and inclusion. So staff members are allowed to nominate themselves or each other or buildings or things like that. And so we had the honor to go around and present these plaques to wonderful people who won this award. Actually have one of our winners here tonight as well. Outside partnerships, so I think it's really important to connect to the community. And so some ways that I do that is working with various organizations to present some of the things that we do, right? So nobody wants to hear me talk all day long, right? Trick question. You passed. You passed. So what we do, for example, we worked with a group that came in and they did a Hindu awareness seminar for us in the summer. They also just recently came in and did one at Smoky Row. So that's just an example of some of the things that we do. We participate in community events such as Carmel Pride. I spearheaded the creation of an Indiana Equity and Inclusion Officers Group. So what that is that has brought together all of the people that do my job in K through 12 in the state, and it is really a helpful thing to be able to bounce ideas off of each other, see what's going on. We get to kind of vet speakers and trainers and things like that. So those are the types of things that we do. Oh, and don't want to forget this. So we do a common read series with Hamilton Southeastern. We have recently added on for this semester Center Grove Schools and Clark Pleasant Schools. And it is just a great opportunity to really read books and talk about them and really, support one another in the things that we're trying to do around equity work. We're not in this work alone. Another outside partnership is working with Noblesville Schools and Hamilton Southeastern Schools. We hosted the first Hamilton County HBCU, Historically Black College and University Fair, this fall, and it was a tremendous success. Hundreds and hundreds of people showed up. We could not have asked for a better turnout and a better event. Carmel hosted the first one, and then the next one will be in Noblesville. So save the date there. September the 7th of this year. Resource development is a really big, important part of my job as well. So I help to create resources to aid our employees in their work. And again, shout out to my committee members because they do a lot of work to help with this as well. We wanted to make it easy and accessible. We know that teachers are so busy, so we want to make their job as easy as possible. Student engagement opportunities. So we have done art contests, poetry contests, essay contests, and things like that as well. I also serve as the Title IX, Title VI, and anti-discrimination coordinator for the district. By law, schools are required to have this position, so this is a part of what I do. So in relation to this aspect of my job, I work with human resources on employee-related matters. I serve as a Title IX investigator, so I work with our legal counsel and Carmel PD to address alleged incidents. We coordinate district-level sexual assault and healthy relationship learning opportunities, working with organizations such as Prevail. And then something that I began this fall was the Sexual Assault Awareness and Response Team. And so I wanted to bring together a cross-section of employees who are able to kind of dig into our sexual assault awareness programming, our response to situations, and things like that. So we have met, I think it's 3 or 4 times now, and so we are really starting to do some good work as we dig into this topic. And I won't read this, but you'll have access to this after These are just some quotes from families and staff members on how kind of the work that we're doing has impacted them positively. So opportunities for growth, right? Everything is not 100% gravy all the time, right? So one area that I've identified as an opportunity for growth is our graduation rates. So as you can see there, our graduation rates are very good, right? And we do beat the state average, but I oftentimes tell our administrators we are not competing against other people, we're competing against ourselves, right? And so if our average is 95%, our goal is 100%, right? So it doesn't matter what XYZ school has. We want to be the best that we can be. So as you can see, our Asian students have the highest rate, and it goes down from there. What we want to see is everybody achieving at that highest rate. So this is what we are trying to do there. So basically, all of these efforts are just, ways to enhance the school culture for our employees and our students. It's really multifaceted and multidimensional work. Um, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve. You have any questions?
Yes. First off, thank you so very much for your time tonight, but also for all of the things that you have done, which makes me very tired to see all of the things that you have done in a short 2-year span. So again, thank you so much. You were something that our district and our community really wanted. We were very thankful through our strategic plan that we were able to hire you, and so we're thankful that you're here. I'm going to turn it over to the board for questions, and then I may have some for myself at the end. Louise?
Terry. Thank you so much for your commitment to just being an advocate from students of various backgrounds, special needs, students who have suffered tremendously, unfortunately. I know the work that you do is not easy. I know that the area of inclusion, equity has become a divisive topic among some, but what I find in this community is we are more united than divided. So I'm grateful just for you being a light. I would love to hear, as you think about the next year, what do you feel like is your greatest challenge and how the board could help and support you?
Should ask for these questions in advance, right? I think one of the biggest challenges is the staff recruitment piece. I think just because, like I mentioned, those national numbers, numbers are numbers, right? So what can we do? And in talking to many, for example, staff of color at different districts and things, a lot of times people want to stay in districts that have what they perceive as a certain need that they don't see Carmel as having. So I think really trying to kind of fight the myth of Carmel. I'm not a Carmel native, and so I heard the myths too, right? And so I think a way that people can help, be it the board or be it anybody, is to really fight back against those stereotypes, because I think it hurts us in the recruitment realm. Really having to dispel those myths.
Thank you. Yeah, just like I mentioned, we are more united than divided. So that's a myth that we are totally divided and not for this piece called equity. And I hear you on the staff recruitment side. I'm always talking to people in the community and outside of the community about how we are an opportunity for awesome talent. So I'll be talking with the board about how we could be more intentional in helping there. I did have one more question. I think I forgot. I'll give other folks another opportunity to speak.
Jennifer?
Thank you, Terry. This was a wonderful presentation. I am a member with my brother on the Anti-Defamation League's Indiana Leadership Council, and I was made aware that February 24th, they will be presenting a professional development day on inclusivity and anti-Semitism awareness. So I applaud the district for incorporating that type of education opportunity into our community. So thank you very much on that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other board questions, comments? Okay. Thank you again so much for being here and all the work that you do every day.
Thank you.
We will now move on to our monthly financial update. You have to follow that, Roger. With-
Yeah, I always get the tough act to follow. Let me see here. Colleen, you're gonna make this work on the screen, right? Okay. What am I doing wrong, Amy?
That's so friendly, that little ringtone. I know, it's very calming.
All right. Well, this month is, reflects the end of the year, so it's here, this report and then after June are the two kind of key months that we look at. So we'll start with education, referendum, and rainy day funds. And for our two newer board members, when I present this information, I combine, these three funds are from an accounting standpoint, are kept separate, but they're, particularly the education fund and the referendum fund, are used for similar purposes. It's really, the education fund is really focused, think of it as expenses in the classroom. So most of our teachers are paid from that fund. And then it's supported by the local referendum fund, which we're very fortunate and privileged that our community has supported that referendum. And then more recently, we've added our rainy day fund. We don't typically spend from that fund. It becomes a part of our overall cash balance that we have in the funds. And you'll hear me talk about cash balance as one key component, because that's kind of like think of it like a savings account at home or something. It comes into play when we sell bond issues, because Standard & Poor's looks at that as a part of our, whether we're, financially stable and so forth. And so we actually have a stated goal to have a minimum of an 8% balance, but we're wanting to increase that to about 12%. And part of that is again, Standard & Poor's would prefer that we had a little more cash balance than we've typically maintained. And so we've included the rainy day fund in this report, and because they also they look at all three of these funds in total in terms of total cash and expenditures and so forth. So you can see here that in this year, at the end of the calendar year, we ended with a cash balance of about 11.2 million. And if you compare that to last year, it was 10.4. So we're very close to what we would have predicted and projected. That balance has, as you can see, has increased slightly. We need it to increase over time, because as a percentage, as our budget increases, then our cash balance dollar-wise needs to increase in order to maintain or increase the percentage. So we're moving in the direction that we want to. We have two major funds: the education fund and then the operations fund. This fund is as the name implies, is for our major operations of facilities, and by that I mean this is cash. So this is money that we're using to do day-to-day maintenance and not to do a major multi-million-dollar renovation project, but the money that is spent, our maintenance staff is paid from this fund. probably most of us at this table are paid from this fund because we're not directly in the classroom. Um, Information services, significant portion of their expenses are in this fund. And I don't know if I mentioned, but also, and then transportation is a huge expense out of this fund. This fund is a little harder to compare from one year to the next in terms of being credible, because the nature of the fund is such that we may spend more money in the first quarter on facility maintenance in one year as compared to the second year. So whereas the first fund, the education fund, the referendum fund, that's primarily salaries, and so they're every 2 weeks, every year. And so from an expenditure standpoint, you can track it, you can compare it, and it'll tend to have more meaning than the operations fund. Here I'll point out that all of our major funds, by the way, are primarily funded with local property tax. The education fund, which is also the largest fund, it is funded from state resources, which is essentially and primarily sales tax and income tax. So it's all taxpayer money, of course, but it's property tax for all the funds except the education fund. And so, but because of that, and you can see it here on the previous slide, and you'll see that our balance is always, we start out in December, but then, or January, and then they'll start to decline because we're paying salaries every 2 weeks. But the local property tax, in this case for our referendum fund, primarily are receiving that, as you know, when people pay their taxes twice a year. So then it comes back up when they pay the taxes, and it comes back up at the end of the year because they paid, hopefully, the November installments. And then this fund, even more so, because it has no state money. And so you can see at the top, the revenue essentially comes in twice a year, but the expenditures are happening all year. That's just the cycle. And so that can create, that we have to consider, cash flow as well, so that we have enough cash and cash balance to kind of fund those expenses through until we receive the revenue, that twice a year distribution of revenue. So here in the operations fund, then we ended the year with just over about $5.1 million, and last year it was $4.4 million. So again, you can't necessarily draw too many conclusions with that, but we are still growing or spending a little bit less than the revenue we're receiving in the operations fund, and that's enabling us to do transfers from time to time from the operations fund to the rainy day fund to build that cash balance over time. As I said, our goal would be to get it to about 12%. Later this year, probably this first quarter, we'll bring a recommendation to transfer about, I believe, $1.5 million from this fund to the rainy day fund to move toward that effort. This then is the rainy day fund, and so we ended this year with $2.3 million. As compared to last year, we had $1.5 million. And last year is also, you'll see about in the middle there, where we had a $2 million expense, which, as you can see, is the rest of the year it's just very minimal. That was a reflection of what we called a COVID stipend that we paid out to employees to assist during that very difficult time. And so I think then these are balances, banking balances at the end of the year. But with that, I'll respond to questions if you have them.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Yes. So a couple slides back, I was looking at the salary piece. Yep, operations. And so I was just wondering, what causes such a variation in the salary expenditure between like January of this year versus December or February of the previous year? What are the pieces that impact that?
So we're on a 26 pay cycle, and so 2 months of the year we're going to have 3 pays, And when
Okay.
you consider the amount of payroll, those 2 months, the expense is going to be, considerably higher than the other two. It varies some in the summer because as you would know, we have a certain number of employees that work and are paid just the 9 months. Teachers, for example, though they're what we call stretch pay, so that most teachers elect to have their pay stretched over all 12 months. And but hourly employees, if like an instructional assistant, for example, they're not working in the summer, so they're not being paid. So the summer months will come down a bit for that reason. But the 2 months when you have the 3 pays it's very obvious where they're at. And January happened to be one of them here in 2021 at least.
Okay, thank you. And we said board salary is 0.0000001% of the salary, correct?
Yeah, we would call that not a material difference, but but we do appreciate your service and volunteerism.
Any other questions from the board? Greg?
Yeah, just a question on the rainy day fund. Is there a balance level you try to maintain? I noticed you had a receipt of just under $1 million. I assume you're trying to bring it up to some point.
Well, the shorter answer is yes, we're wanting to maintain a balance there along with the balance in the education fund and the referendum fund, so that the 3 funds combined, we want it to get to about 12%. We're closer to 8 now than the 12. And so over time, we anticipate that to the extent that we have money available to transfer to that fund, then the balance in that fund will grow over time. But for the most part, that's not a fund that we will make regular expenses from. It is a fund that it's kind of like, think of it as like or at least that fund is kind of like part of the savings account. In that we will maintain cash in there in order to support the overall cash balance of the other 2 funds.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Roger.
You're welcome.
We will now move on to the legislative update. Ms. Williams.
Thank you very much, Madam President. So this is the beginning of the legislative session, and as does happen every time the session opens, lots of bills come forward. People have lots of ideas. You might hear about different things in the press. But as it moves along, oftentimes many of those things fall off. They lose momentum, they don't get hearings. So there are some of the bills that are of interest to the school district. Educator workforce, mental behavioral health workforce, special education funding, regulatory relief, and school safety. Some of these bills that are notable to watch would be House Bill 1001, which is a budgetary bill, Senate Bill 1, which talks about mental behavioral health funds, House Bill 1002, which is a rethinking of high school bill, Senate Bill 486, some regulatory relief, and House Bill 1492, which references school safety. So the district, and Dr. Beresford, is a tremendous resource to our legislators, and because of his vast education and historical knowledge, and he's a tremendous resource, is often called upon to answer questions and to discuss how different bills in their thought process may affect the schools. So we strongly believe all legislation should be evaluated through the lens of the impact it will have on the promotion of the education profession, because we certainly as the board and our administration believe that the education profession is noble and should be respected and become a rewarding career for the people who serve our children and in turn the families of Central Indiana. So as more things progress during the session, we will give further updates, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Jenny? Okay, we will now move on to the enrollment transfer report. Dr. Michael Beresford.
Thank you. So while Colleen pulls it up, thank you for that report. A lot of interesting things going on downtown, and but it's, like you said, it's early, and we do try to serve as a resource for our lawmakers so they know boots on the ground, you know, what the impact things that are placed in bills and policy that's being made, what impact that would have on the, you know, at the school level. And there's a lot of good things going on, but also some things we got to keep our eyes on that could be potentially harmful. So we'll find out where it goes. All right, we had talked a while back, I think, in an agenda meeting about the transfer report. And what happens is every year, the IDOE, we fill out a report, and the IDOE pulls a lot of data together, and we can kind of see what the enrollment numbers look like and how they play out. And so this report was built off of the ADM, you know, the day, which is the average daily membership. And we'll start with just some definitions. There's kind of three basic categories that the report talks about. One is public transfers, so this is parent choice. So these are students that live in a school corporation, but they're enrolled in a different corporation based on an agreement with the parents. Some school corporations are called open enrollment, so you can enroll your kid in a school district that you don't live in, and because that's what that board is determined to do. Other times it can be, Indiana law allows teachers and other school employees that if you work in a district, your kids can go to the school, the same district that you work at. So sometimes that can be a choice as well. The second category is public transfers, which would be like charter schools. And these are, again, are students in a legal settlement in a school corporation, but they attend a public charter school either in or outside of the district. Third category is called non-public transfers and choice scholarships. That's a program the state has where folks can take some choice scholarship funding and go to a non-public school. That's part of the choice scholarship program. So here's the numbers from Carmel Clay Schools. There we go. So looking at and what happens is this is every available student that lives in the Carmel Clay Schools boundary. So 96.9%, so about 97% of our students that live in our school boundaries go to our schools. Public transfer out is about 265 students. And then you can look at 232 is the choice scholarship students. Now, what's not represented in this graph is 194 incoming public transfers from outside of our boundaries, which is our teachers that live outside of our district, bring their teachers or other school employees, I'm sorry, that will bring their kids to our school district. And so that we have the 194 kids that are coming our way through that program. And the next slide. So we'll start with transfers. So here's kind of a breakdown of them. And you can see through the numbers that choice scholarships are about 38.9%. Charter schools are about 41.5%. And then parent choice is about 19.4%. There's a little sliver of other in there, but there's not much. We have one student in the other category. So question on your mind is, where are these kids going? So you can see that as far as the public transfers go, about 25 students go to Zionsville, and you can look on down the list. Washington Township kind of makes sense. Those are districts on our boundaries. A lot of times, like I said, these could be teachers that live here, and they take their kids with them to the school district that they go to. If you look down, you look at Cloverdale and go, wow, who's driving to Cloverdale every day? Well, a lot of the smaller districts are running virtual programs at their schools because their enrollment is declining. So if you look at schools that are really far away, they're probably involved in a virtual school, or they have some kind of a living situation where they're in different places. But that's you can kind of get a look at where all the different places people go. And then we'll move to charters, and you can see that Indiana Connections Academy is our top charter school, and that is actually a online school as well. And then Options Charter School has been present in Hamilton County for a long time, and we've got a great partnership with Options. They really serve an at-risk population in a really good way, and we work very closely with them with some different situations, so that's always good. And as you can look down through, there's more Indiana connections. So some of these are schools that are just nearby, and then other ones are, again, would probably fit into virtual type schools. And next is non-public transfers. So this is choice scholarships. So the choice scholarships, Heritage Christian is the big winner with 53 students from our area. And then Garrett, as you would anticipate, is next in line. St. Luke's, Colonial Christian, and Rebuff are the double digits. And then you go down through there and see there's quite a few Christian and really schools from every faith and other places. All right. And that is our transfer report. So if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer or try to answer them.
Thank you for putting that together. That was something that we requested that, and to confirm that comes from the IDOE, correct?
Yeah, that comes straight from the Department of Education, and every student has what's called STN number, so they're able to track. So when someone goes to a different school, eventually, either if they either request records from us when we find out, or they're assigned that STN number, and so the state has to account for all that.
And if they're and to confirm, if they're represented in the first numbers, like with the total students, but not represented with the schools, then they're being homeschooled or something else.
Yeah, that would be an option. Homeschool is supposed to register as well, so there should be a registration on that. So, but it's a little more difficult to track, I believe.
Okay. But those account with that first graph with the total number, correct?
I'm not sure about where homeschools fit into that when we did that. I don't know that they track enrolled students in a homeschool. So these are enrolled students in schools.
Yes, I just meant so you had the total number of possibilities,
Mhm.
and then the total number of how many are not. So that number is accurate regardless of where they're going.
Right. The number of kids that are enrolled in school, that number is accurate somewhere.
Can you go back to the first slide?
Yep.
I think I'm confusing myself. I'm sorry.
You might be.
That one. This total students in CCS boundaries.
Uh-huh.
And then we know how many are enrolled in our school district. So then if you're a homeschool student, you got to fall within that, right? Somewhere.
I'm not sure because I'd have to double check on that. But if you're homeschooling, you're not enrolled into a school. So this is a school report on enrollment.
I got you.
So I don't know that homeschool is in this particular number.
It's not. Okay, perfect.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now I will.
That's a hard question.
Yeah.
That's good.
Sorry. That's what, Questions from the board? Jennifer?
Well, this is just a comment. I did, just to your question, look up in the Census Bureau how many children are between the ages of 5 and 19 in the boundaries of Carmel. And there were approximately 19,000 children who are 5 to 19. So these numbers would kind of shake out to that because some 5-year-olds are too young to be in school and 19-year-olds might be too old. So within that number, minus these people, there would show that, there's a small number. It would seem like 1,000 or so that are maybe in homeschooling.
Thank you. You're welcome. She knew my answer.
Yeah. Should ask Jennifer.
Any other questions? Kristen?
I just wanted to comment that part of that number you were talking about could likely be children who are enrolled in ABA or other type centers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Greg, did you have a question?
Yeah, maybe just more of a comment. On the charter schools, or on the private schools, I'm sorry, those are schools that can be pretty expensive. And there's a lot of families, I would think, even in Carmel, that cannot afford that option. So I would think that's a pretty
Can you elaborate, Greg, for us on what did you mean?
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
realized that. I'll
It-
get used to that someday.
Yeah, maybe I just didn't hear you. Could you just elaborate on when you said you are anticipating there are likely students in the district that would like to go to private school but can't afford it? What did you mean by that? Can you just elaborate on what that is?
Yeah, certainly. I'm just thinking that public schools, there's so much, there's so many pros as an option. You've got school buses, you've got the critical mass of the size of the schools. We have lots of programs and lots of flexibility because you got large staffs, with teacher absences, there's ways to flex. And so there's a lot of reasons to go to a public school that are appealing. But for those families that, for whatever reason they may have, do not find that public school is the best option for their children or one of their children, most options that we have now in our community are very expensive. They're private options. So they're like Heritage rate, I think it ranges from $12,000 to $16,000 a year per student, plus you got to get them there. A lot of families have two income parents, and there's just no way to, pull it off. So that's what I was getting at, is that you think of choices. I think choices are pretty important in this country, and I think schools fall into that too. But, the numbers are low. We've got 3%, not considering homeschool. We don't really know the number in the population that have chosen to not be in the public school. It just appears, my observation is we don't have a lot of options in our community for like a public charter school that's tuition free like we are here, to have a different kind of program like a classical education that's kind of traditional but not, and some parents might prefer that. So I just think it's something we need to be thinking about when we're looking at what else we might be able to do for the community.
That's helpful. Last question I have is, just tell us a little bit about the difference between a classical education and the education we provide in Carmel. What's the difference there?
I'm probably not the best one to elaborate on that, but there's things that are like, I know one thing I think Valor's looking at, I think I saw it with Valor, is like teaching Latin as a fundamental part of the learning process. It helps with learning different Latin-based languages down the road, Spanish or French or others like that. And kind of just some different styles of teaching. A lot are focused on music being part of all the children's music and the arts. And I know we do a lot of that too, but there's just some differences. There's smaller schools too. I think a lot of, our high school is huge. 5,200, I think, or so students. A lot of kids might feel lost in that, but they might be looking for another option where the senior class isn't over 1,000, maybe it's more a few hundred or 100 or so. So it's just different options, I think, makes sense.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the?
I wanted to comment, just because I wanted to just comment that most of these on the public transfers charter slide are in person, have physical buildings. I just wanted to note that. Indiana Connections Academy is an online school, but a good portion of the rest of those have actual physical buildings.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Beresford, for presenting this information from the IDOE.
All righty.
And we will now move on to our next section,
I think
which
it's
is you.
I think it's a superintendent's report.
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
hey, I want to thank everybody for coming at 6 o'clock tonight. So our first 6 o'clock building. Well, that was a lot of fun. And I want to thank you, Roger, for giving us I think we all graduated from a 3-hour course on school funding 101. You guys, I hope you get an appreciation for how complex school funding is, and the various processes, and a lot of things that you witnessed tonight were a lot of pieces of all the details that you have to do to be compliant with the law, and also with the Department of Education. And there's just a lot of people that have very detailed work on that, and that Roger and his team just do a phenomenal job of keeping our buildings up to a very high level and getting the facilities that our kids need. He once said, which I thought was a great line, was that sometimes our buildings kind of wear out, and that makes them, we need to do something with them to build them back up and get them back up to the level they need to be. And other times, programming makes a building obsolete because our programs change and the needs that moving forward are. So both of those things, they do a very good job of making sure that we do that. And to think about doing that and keeping that tax rate level for years and years and years and years is a real good stewardship of the taxpayers' money. So thank you very much. And boy, you covered an awful lot of things. And I felt like I was back in class in school funding. Also, I was excited about the change orders. The reason why I'm excited about change orders is that means that the projects are getting done. So when they get down to the end, when you do the change orders keep coming up, that means that we're punching it out. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the completion of the fine arts expansion. And they're already using some of the rooms that have been, kind of renovated and different settings, and it's really exciting. And I've seen the kids actually work, playing their music and doing their dance and singing their songs in that space, and it's been way too tight for way too long. So I really appreciate that project. It'll be coming to an end here. So with all that, I got a reasonably short report, which I know is unusual for me, but I did want to give a big shout out to the Collegewood Science Bowl team. They are the state champions of Indiana. So there you go, Collegewood. Steely-eyed science people in Collegewood. So congratulations to them and their teachers, and just fantastic. Another big shout out goes to Cole Matheson. He's our cross-country guy. Everybody knows about Cole. Well, he's now been named the 2022-23 Gatorade Indiana Boys Cross Country Player of the Year. So there you go. Clap for Cole. Now, I hate to be critical of Gatorade, but they aren't players, they're runners. So he is the cross-country runner of the year, so I'll get with him and get it straight. But this award recognizes not only athletic performance, athletic excellence. He won the state of Indiana, he won the national cross-country meet. But it also has high standards of academic achievement and exemplary character demonstrated on and off the field. And this award distinguishes Cole as Indiana's best. And if you've met him, if you know him at all, he's that guy. And so it's really nice when good kids, and I bet his family's just beaming, and good kids that work hard and they're good human beings. He's top of the notch. So way to go, Cole. And I want to wish you all a happy Chinese New Year. A great night for Equity Inclusion Night, because Mrs. B and I were invited to attend the Indianapolis Chinese Community Center's New Year celebration just last night. And so there was many members of the CCS family there. A lot of students were in the program as well. And what I learned was this is the year of the rabbit, okay? And so you're asking, what's that? And so people that are born in the year of the rabbit are predicted to be gentle, quiet, elegant, and alert, as well as quick, skillful, kind, patient, and very responsible. So this sounds a lot like our kids and go to Carmel Clay schools. The rabbit also symbolizes mercy and beauty. I also learned that the rabbit is known to be the luckiest out of all the 12 animals, and people born in the year of the rabbit are calm and peaceful. They avoid fighting and arguing at all times, but are artistic and have good taste in life. So these are certainly attributes that, that we need right now, and that many of the attributes our students display, and something we need a lot more of. So I think I'm saying is we all need to be rabbits. But I want to tell you that I look forward to welcoming all of our kiddos who are born this year, because in about 5 years they're going to join us at CCS, and we're going to welcome them with wide open arms. And finally, my bell ringer. You thought that was the bell ringer, but no, there's more. Today was the start of the Culture of Care Week at Carmel High School, and this year's theme is Flicker of Hope. And it's based on a picture book about asking for help when you need it and being a hope builder and growing a community of hope builders. It's a pretty simple story about a candle that's flickering, and how another candle helps it shine bright again. And then that candle that was flickering and shine bright now helps yet another flickering candle. So it's a great metaphor to understand that it's okay to not be okay and that everybody needs a little bit of help at some time or another. And don't be afraid to reach out and don't be afraid to help someone else. So, Culture of Care Week started in Carmel High School in 2017, and it was to bring awareness and education about mental health and reduce the stigma that's really associated with mental health and getting help that you need, reaching out for help. So this week will include some special events and different resources for students and staff. I imagine Jim Dandy and I will take a cruise over there so he can get petted by lots of kids. Culture Cares became a district-wide, I think it was 2019 maybe, that it became a district-wide celebration. So that's kind of done throughout the year, but you'll see a lot of the Culture of Care weeks are in the winter when it's kind of a doldrum time, I guess. So the final part of the bell ringer is if your candle's flickering a bit, reach out for help. Let's all be hope builders, and let's just take care of one another. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. B. I will now take a motion to adjourn. Second? All those in favor? Meeting adjourns. Thank you.